During World War II, at Auschwitz-Birkenau, the Nazis created a prisoner unit known as the Sonderkommando. These were mostly Jewish prisoners who were forced to work inside the gas chamber and crematorium complex. Their job was to remove the bodies of murdered prisoners, search them for valuables, cut their hair, remove gold teeth, and burn the bodies. They were given no real choice. Refusing to do the work could mean death. And because the Sonderkommando knew what was happening inside the killing facilities, the SS routinely murdered members of the unit after only a few months and replaced them with new prisoners. The work was psychologically devastating. Some prisoners were forced to handle the bodies of people they knew, and even members of their own families. As the number of victims increased, the Nazis also used open-air burning pits when the crematoria could not handle the bodies. The Nazis were also determined to destroy evidence of the mass murder. Prisoners were forced to burn bodies and later ashes, while camp officials destroyed records as Soviet forces approached. But the Sonderkommando did not simply accept their fate. On October 7, 1944, prisoners at Crematorium 4 learned that the SS planned to eliminate more members of their unit. They decided to resist. Women working at a nearby armaments factory had secretly smuggled gunpowder into the camp. The prisoners used the explosives during the uprising, attacked SS guards, and set fire to Crematorium 4. Several hundred prisoners took part in the revolt. The rebellion was quickly crushed. About 250 prisoners were killed during the fighting, and another 200 were shot afterward, according to the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. The 4 Jewish women identified as suppliers of the explosives were later publicly executed. By January 1945, Soviet forces were approaching Auschwitz. The Nazis began evacuating the camp and forcing tens of thousands of prisoners onto death marches toward camps farther west. Some Sonderkommando prisoners survived by blending into the larger prisoner population. Very few members of the Sonderkommando survived the war. For years, their role was sometimes misunderstood, but the writings and evidence they secretly left behind helped document what the Nazis had tried so desperately to conceal. They were not willing participants in the Holocaust. At the Buchenwald concentration camp, one of the most disturbing stories to emerge after the war involved Ilse Koch, the wife of the camp's first commandant, Karl Otto Koch. She became known as the Witch of Buchenwald because of allegations about her treatment of prisoners and her involvement in the camp's brutal system. But the most horrifying part of the story involved tattooed human skin. At Buchenwald, the SS removed tattooed skin from the bodies of murdered prisoners and processed it into objects such as lampshades and pocket knife cases. The Buchenwald Memorial confirms that this practice existed and that some preserved pieces were genuine human skin. There were also reports that prisoners with distinctive tattoos were selected for this purpose. Historical evidence confirms that tattooed human skin was prepared and displayed as evidence after the camp was liberated in 1945. But one important detail is often exaggerated. The claim that Ilse Koch personally ordered prisoners with beautiful tattoos to be killed specifically so she could have their skin made into household objects has been debated, and historians have found insufficient evidence to support every detail of that popular story. What is firmly established is disturbing enough. The SS at Buchenwald did use the skin of murdered prisoners to create macabre objects. Ilse Koch was eventually put on trial for her crimes. Her case became one of the most notorious stories connected to Buchenwald, and her name remained permanently associated with the camp's brutal history. As Nazi Germany collapsed in the final days of World War II, one of the most feared men in the regime suddenly disappeared. His name was Heinrich Müller, the head of the Gestapo, Nazi Germany's secret state police. Under his leadership, the Gestapo played a major role in the persecution and murder carried out by the Nazi regime. Müller was last reliably seen in Berlin in the final days of April and early May 1945 as Soviet forces closed in on the city. After that, he vanished. The war ended, but there was no confirmed body and no clear explanation of what had happened to him. For years, Western intelligence agencies investigated reports that Müller might have escaped Germany. Some theories placed him somewhere in Eastern Europe or even South America. Declassified U.S. intelligence records show that American agencies followed numerous leads, but they could never establish that he had escaped, or even locate him after the war. Then, in 2013, new historical research appeared to solve the mystery. Historian Johannes Tuchel uncovered archival evidence indicating that Müller had most likely died in Berlin during the collapse of Nazi Germany. According to the research, his body was found in August 1945 and identified from documents found on him. He was then buried in a mass grave at a former Jewish cemetery in Berlin, so the man who had seemingly vanished without a trace may never have escaped Germany at all. Inside Auschwitz, Block 10 became one of the places where Nazi doctors carried out secret and brutal medical experiments on prisoners. Among the victims were hundreds of Jewish women who were subjected to experiments involving forced sterilization. One of the doctors, Karl Klauberg, tested a chemical method designed to block the fallopian tubes. The procedures caused severe pain and could lead to bleeding, infection, sepsis, and death. Other experiments involved X-rays. Dr. Horst Schumann exposed the reproductive organs of prisoners to radiation in an attempt to determine how to cause infertility. The treatment could leave victims with severe radiation burns and other serious injuries. Block 10 was also used for other medical experiments, including research into cervical cancer and the testing of drugs and treatments on prisoners. None of these victims had given consent. What makes Block 10 so disturbing is that these procedures were presented as medical research, while the prisoners were treated as experimental subjects whose lives and health meant nothing to the Nazi doctors. Today, Block 10 still stands at Auschwitz. Its empty rooms are a reminder of a place where medicine was stripped of ethics and turned into an instrument of suffering. In October 1955, a small passenger vessel called the MV Joyita left Apia, Samoa, heading toward the Tokelau Islands. There were 25 people aboard, 16 crew members and 9 passengers. But the vessel never reached its destination. When the Joyita was finally discovered more than a month later, it was drifting far off course in the South Pacific. And there was something deeply unsettling about it. The ship was completely empty. All 25 people were gone. Investigators found signs that something had gone wrong aboard the vessel. There were blood-stained bandages, the ship's logbook and several life rafts were missing, and the radio was only capable of transmitting over a very limited range because of faulty wiring. A formal inquiry was launched, but it couldn't determine what had happened to the people aboard. The final conclusion was essentially that their fate remained inexplicable based on the evidence available. Over the years, several theories emerged. One suggested that the passengers and crew believed the ship was sinking and abandoned it in panic. Another theory claimed that they may have encountered a Japanese fishing fleet or even former Japanese forces still hiding in the Pacific. There were also darker theories involving pirates and even a Soviet submarine. But none of these theories was ever proven. The supposed Japanese connection in particular was never supported by reliable evidence, and knives found aboard the Joyita were later determined to be unrelated to any attack. The case became known as the Mary Celeste of the South Pacific. In the summer of 1941, Auschwitz became the setting for an extraordinary act of sacrifice. After a prisoner escaped, the camp authorities selected 10 prisoners to die by starvation as punishment. Among them was a Polish prisoner named Franciszek Gajowniczek, who cried out that he had a wife and children. Then something unexpected happened. A Polish Franciscan priest named Maximilian Kolbe stepped forward and offered to take Gajowniczek's place. The SS agreed. Kolbe and the other prisoners were taken to the starvation cell in Block 11, where they were deliberately deprived of food and water. For nearly 2 weeks, Kolbe remained alive while several of the others died. According to the Auschwitz-Birkenau State Museum, prisoners in the cell could be heard praying and singing. On August 14, 1941, the SS found that Kolbe was still alive. Instead of allowing him to remain there, they killed him with a lethal phenol injection. Franciszek Gajowniczek survived Auschwitz and lived until 1995. Decades later, Kolbe's act of self-sacrifice became one of the most remembered stories from Auschwitz. He was beatified in 1971 and canonized as a saint by Pope John Paul II in 1982. In a place created to destroy human dignity, Maximilian Kolbe chose to give his life so another man could live. At Auschwitz, SS Dr. Josef Mengele became notorious for his brutal experiments on prisoners, especially twins and children. Mengele was interested in genetics, heredity, and physical characteristics. He ordered twins to be measured, examined, photographed, and subjected to repeated blood tests and painful medical procedures without their consent. He was also involved in experiments related to eye color. Substances were placed into the eyes of children and newborns as part of attempts to study eye pigmentation. The results could include severe irritation, swelling, blindness, and even death. The twins were treated as research subjects rather than human beings. In some cases, Mengele had twins killed at the same time so their bodies could be examined and compared after death. One disturbing story often repeated about Mengele is that he sewed twins together to create Siamese twins. But the Auschwitz-Birkenau State Museum states that this did not happen and considers it one of the myths that grew around his experiments. What is firmly documented is horrifying enough. Children were subjected to painful and sometimes lethal experiments in the name of Nazi racial ideology and pseudoscience. Mengele escaped after the war and never faced trial for his crimes. He died in Brazil in 1979. His story remains a chilling reminder of what can happen when medicine is stripped of ethics and human life is treated as nothing more than an experiment.